The earlier part of the 18th century from 1700 to the 1744 or the Augustan age in English literature is called the Age of Pope because Alexander Pope was the dominating figure in that period. Though there were a number of other important writers like Addison and Swift, but Pope was the only one who devoted himself completely to literature during this period. Moreover, he represented in himself all the main characteristics of his age, and his poetry served as a model to others. Moreover, he represented in himself all the main characteristics of his age, and his poetry served as a model to others. Poetry and the prose were dominating and distinguished literary feature of the age of Pope. In the poetry, it was the classical school of poetry which dominated the poetry of the age of Pope. During this age, the people were distinguished with the profligacy and frivolity of the Restoration period, and they insisted upon those elementary decencies of life and conduct which were looked at with contempt by the preceding generation. Prose being the prominent medium of expression, the rules of exactness, precision, and clarity which were insisted in the writing of prose also began to be applied to poetry. It was demanded of the poet to say all that he had to say in a plain, simple, and clear language. The result was that the meaning of poetry was all on the surface, and there was nothing which required deep study and varied interpretation. Alexander Pope is considered as the greatest poet of the classical period. He is Prince of Classicism, as Professor Etten calls him. He was an invalid of small stature and delicate constitution, whose bad nerves and cruel headaches made his life, in his own phrase, a long disease. He was highly intellectual, extremely ambitious, and capable of tremendous industry. These qualities brought him to the front rank of men of letters, and during his lifetime he was looked upon as a model poet. The main quality of Pope's poetry is its correctness. It was at the age of 23 that he published his Essay on Criticism in 1711, and since then, till the end of his life, he enjoyed prodigious reputation. Pope's next work, The Rape of the Lock, is in some ways his masterpiece. It is mock heroic poem in which he celebrated the theme of the steal by Lord Peter of lock of hair from the head of Miss Arbella. Though the poem is written in a jest and deals with a very insignificant event, it is given the form of an epic, investing the frivolous event with mock seriousness and dignity. By this time, Pope had perfected the heroic couplet, and he made use of his technical skill in translating Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, which meant a very hard work of 11 years. The reputation which Pope now enjoyed created a host of jealous rivals, whom he severely criticized and ridiculed in the Dunciad. This is Pope's greatest style in which he attacked all sorts of literary incompetence. It is full of cruel and insulting couplets on his enemies. His next great poem was the Essay on Man, which is full of brilliant oft-quoted passages and lines. His later works, Imitation of Horace and Epistle, are also styles and contain biting attacks on his enemies and rivals. Though Pope enjoyed a tremendous reputation during his lifetime, and for some decades after his death, he was so bitterly attacked during the 19th century that it was doubted whether Pope was a poet at all. But in the 20th century, this reaction subsided, and now it is admitted by great critics that though much that Pope wrote is prosaic, not of a very high order, yet a part of his poetry is undoubtedly indestructible. He is the supreme master of the epigrammatic style of condensing an idea into a line or couplet. The minor poets of the age of Pope. During this age, Pope was by far the greatest of all poets. There were a few minor poets, Matthew Pure, John Gay, Edward Young, Thomas Purnell, and Larry Winchelsea. Among the prose writers, Daniel Defoe, Jonathan Swift, and Joseph Addison were more prominent. The prose of this period exhibits the classical qualities clearness, vigor, and direct statement. Daniel Defoe is the earliest literary journalist in the English literature. He wrote on all sorts of subjects, social, political, literary, and brought out about 250 publications. At the age of 60, he turned his attention to the writing of prose fiction and published his first novel, Robinson Crusoe, the book by which he is universally known. Jonathan Swift was the most powerful and original genius of his age. He was highly intellectual, but on account of some radical disorder in his system and the repeated failures which he had to face in the realization of his ambition to rise in public life, made him a bitter, melancholy, and sardonic figure. His best-known work, Gulliver's Travels, which is a very popular children's book, is also a bitter attack on contemporary political and social life in particular, and on the meanness and littleness of man in general. Swift's The Tale of a Tub, which, like Gulliver's Travels, is written in the form of an allegory and exposes the weakness of the main religious beliefs opposed to Protestant religion, is also a satire upon all science and philosophy. He wrote Journal to Stella to Esther Johnson, whom Swift loved, is not only an excellent commentary on contemporary characters and political events by one of the most powerful and original minds of the age. Joseph Addison and Sir Richard Steele, who worked in collaboration, were the originators of the periodical essays. Steele, who was more original, led the way by founding the Tatler, the first of the long line of 18th century periodical essays. This was followed by the most famous of them, The Spectator, is which Addison, who had formerly contributed to Steele's Tatler, now became the chief partner. It began on March 1, 1711 and ran till December 20, 1714, with a break of about 18 months. In its complete form, it contains 635 essays. Of these, Addison wrote 274 and Steele 240. The remaining 121 were contributed by various friends.